everyone. Welcome to another one of our charter school webinars, or really interactive online sessions as we've planned them and described them. We wanted to design these sessions so we could support charter schools in a variety of topics and also have some time for us to get together and talk to some other teachers trying the same things that we are. So I'm glad that you're all here, and let's get started. So today's session one. Our next session will be on Tuesday, April 2nd, where we'll continue our work. If you like to use the closed captioning, that is enabled, and you can use your toolbar to enable the closed captioning today. And you will receive a recording of this series after it is closed, along with a certificate of attendance. My name is Jacqueline Carabinas. I am the Director of Literacy with Demonstrated Success, and I'm excited to be here to talk about engagement and agency today. I think that sometimes the word engagement can be a buzzword, but I'm excited to break it down today for all of you. So thank you to the NHED Charter Grant for making these sessions possible. And please participate as you feel ready to with the chat box, or you can even unmic if you like. So here are the overarching goals for our work together today and next Tuesday. I'm hoping that when we're finished, that participants will be able to explain the nuances of these terms, engagement, compliance, and agency. We'll explore the role of motivation and engagement, conditions for engagement, and ways to describe agency and engagement in our classrooms. And the understanding that I'm hoping we build is that engagement is a state of flow that has many things that have an impact on it, and that true engagement rests at the intersection of motivation and active learning. So those are some overarching understandings that you might be able to hook your learning onto today and next week as we learn together. So I want you to take a moment to think of an activity that takes you away to a deep state of engagement. This could be something you do regularly or a specific time in the past that you recall. And, grab hopefully a notebook nearby, or maybe you can open up Notes app on your phone or a tab on your computer and just jot some thinking down. I find it helpful sometimes to gather my thoughts for something like this. Before I share. So just take a moment and describe this task in the context that you're doing this task or activity, emotions that you feel, your motivation for it, the mental state you can recall, any response you have to challenge or frustration, things like that. So go ahead and take a minute or two and just jot down your thoughts. All right, so I hope that those of you who are joining us by watching the video recording later took a moment to pause and jot down your thoughts as well. But I'll just share, I'll share one of mine. So an activity that sort of takes me away to a deep state of engagement is, it sounds silly, and this is work related, but it's curating resources. I find that when I know exactly the topic that I need to find resources for, and I know the audience. So if I'm working with a school or a team specifically, and I'm aware of the kinds of things they're looking to do or to try or to learn about, I love curating resources, and I can get lost doing this for quite some time. I love reviewing my favorites and sorting through ones that maybe I've moved on from, or being reminded of ones I haven't thought of in a while, discovering new ones. Often I end up going down rabbit holes when I'm looking for new resources, and it's just something that I find myself losing track of time. And my purpose is really, it is people related. My motivation is being able to provide support directly to people and people that I have in mind. So that's something that that gives me this true sense of engagement, something that I sort of slip away into the task. I can think of a couple other ones that are non-work related, but stop and think about yours and see if any of the emotions that I had resonated with you. So author and educator Ellen Oliver Keene recently, maybe about 3 years ago, put out her recent book on engagement. And through her at her action research in classrooms, trying to really investigate what engagement looks like and feels like in classrooms. She determined these four pillars. This intellectual urgency from I have to know more, through emotional resonance, you're into it with all your heart and mind, perspective bending, when you discover that other learners can affect your thinking and you can affect theirs, and that aesthetic world of this, just that feeling that something is so cool and it feels like it was made just for you. And I love thinking of these emotions and feelings because I think sometimes they're rare for us, not just in school or our professional lives, but in our personal lives as well. And one of the things that we are going to do today is really go inward and reflect on these feelings and the way we recognize engagement and agency in ourselves, because I find that often recognizing behaviors or understanding the way we take things on as humans helps us understand how our little humans, or not so little humans, if you teach high school, might experience this in the classroom. So I think about how naming my own experiences will provide insight into engagement in the classroom, because I find that if I can identify how I got to a state of engagement and identify the factors that led me there or allowed me to be fully engaged, or any factors that felt like barriers, or anything that derailed me, it helps me think about how that might impact students as well when they are working in the classroom. So we're going to take a moment and hear from that author I just mentioned, along with another author, Tom Newkirk. And in this conversation, they discuss the importance of teachers having their own passions, not necessarily to pass that particular knowledge on to students, but to gain insight into the nature of being caught up in learning. And also, I would add, to remember what that feels like, and remember what that takes. So when we're planning that in the classroom, we can keep that in mind.
So clearly the implication is that teachers have to be engaged themselves or find some way of demonstrating their engagement,
Yeah.
which coincides with the belief that I think the great teachers have some kind of obsession or some passion. Like I remember
Yeah.
having these history teachers that just loved the Civil War.
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm not sure that they taught me to love the Civil War, but they taught me what it was like to love something.
And that's the point. It's not about the content of your, or the focus of your obsession. It's how you find yourself slipping into the grasp of that obsession and becoming cognitively, emotionally. Emotion plays a huge role here, cognitively and emotionally and aesthetically even caught up. So caught up that you're not aware of time and you're not aware of even of your surroundings. I think we could have a lot more of that in classrooms.
So practically, what might that look like?
So I think there are a couple of things that we need to think about. Lots of modeling on the part of the teacher. And I ask teachers in workshops all the time to talk about those passions, to talk about those things that, those times in which they find themselves deeply engaged. And you can't stop the talk. Once people start to have that conversation, they want to go on and on. So I don't have any doubt that teachers can model that. I just don't know that we thought of it. So it starts with a lot of modeling. It also starts with helping kids be metacognitive about the level of their engagement. Am I doing this to be compliant? Am I doing this because I was told to participate in this group activity? Or am I really deeply engaged?
Okay. So we'll take a look at types of engagement now. So three major types of engagement: cognitive, emotional, behavioral. And we break them into those three categories. And, those can even be broken down further. But we can think in terms of these are like our three umbrella categories of engagement. And when we think of these, we can think like certainly there is some overlap, but I wanted to give some examples. So one example of cognitive engagement might be in a high school class where a teacher introduces something challenging, but instead of lecturing, the teacher facilitates a discussion where students are actively analyzing or asking questions, proposing hypotheses. And so they're engaged cognitively in this challenging content. because they're provided by the teacher. They're given space and, hopefully the parameters to think critically about the topic, apply their knowledge, and participate in activities where they can learn from one another. And then this other example I wanted to provide for emotional is thinking about if you're, reading a novel, a middle school or high school, even elementary school, or if, there's a book club or a read aloud. If there are themes of loss and resilience, students might explore an emotion wheel to better understand the many ways that people might describe emotions related to the themes in the book. And so this kind of engagement will enhance the understanding of characters, but also creates a shared language to discuss strong emotions in the classroom without having students feel as though they need to, share a personal story to relate to the story. They have the language to describe and can maybe even self-identify with some of the feelings that those situations give them. And then behavioral, just an example in a math class, fractions, always so hard. The teacher might implement a hands-on activity. Students could be working together in small groups to construct various representations of one whole. And so with a task like this, it's relatively open-ended. There are lots of right answers. And so it allows groups to share their thinking and see what each other are creating. The teacher can move around the room and offer guidance and praise. And so students are behaviorally engaged, manipulating objects, they're interacting with peers and applying principles in this very tangible way. So now we're going to shift into thinking of these types of engagement, but thinking of levels of engagement. And so this is where we start to pull apart the difference between engagement and compliance. So if we look all the way at the bottom, we have, engagement, high attention, high commitment. We're in it. We're in it to win it. We're completely there. And so, like you heard in the video, Ellen said, we can't always be there. We need a rest. And it's not realistic to think that we will be completely immersed and engaged all day long. I don't think that we're built for that. However, whenever we're thinking about what we want from students, we might think of a range of opportunities that students have so that they do have a chance to get into that state of flow. Looking at type 2, strategic compliance, I think a lot of school is this. And I think that, for the most part, that's okay. I think that it's okay for kids to be strategically compliant. I think that there certainly can be a level of engagement involved when a student is being compliant. By definition. But you can see as these go on that the engagement starts to deteriorate. So when we get into ritual compliance, we're just going through the motions, all the way to, you can probably imagine some students students come to mind for retreatism and rebellion, students that are, they're not showing the attention, nor are they showing any commitment, and even some diverted attention. And so, I still feel like there can be some engagement in strategic compliance, but it definitely deteriorates as these move on. So this is another way to look at this model. That was Schlechty's model for levels of engagement. This is that same model, but just sort of reworked a little bit so we can think about some different angles from John Spencer. And so in this graphic, we can kind of see where the attention goes for strategic compliance and engagement. High attention. And then the shift from engagement to strategic compliance is that low commitment, maybe even just a lower commitment than if you're highly committed to something. And of course, just like we saw in the other graphic, the more you move toward rebellion, the less attention and the less commitment that a student will show. And we know that students, might show this for a variety of reasons. And so getting curious about that is one way that we can begin to try to approach our classroom in different ways. So we're going to watch a quick video right now just to get an example of an engaged classroom. And it's not one of those like immersed, students are completely in a state of flow kind of engagement, but you can see that students are really They're invested because the teacher provides a number of different ways, entry points for students to be engaged. And so in this video, they're using what's called a notice wonder protocol with image reading. They're actually going to be reading a graph. You may have heard this as in like a see, think, wonder. That's another way to say it. And she's using it to pique interest and uncover what students already know. And so let's take a look.
Take a look at your graph.
In most classes, variability is the norm, not the exception.
We're going to be doing an I notice, I wonder.
This teacher is aware that these children learn at different paces, and so she is creating a mechanism to see the developmental starting points of a diverse group of kids so that children can move at different rates to master the content.
This classroom is heterogeneously grouped. This is a non-tracked class. Some kids will be bypassing Algebra 1 next year and going into an advanced class, and some kids will be taking a pre-algebra class. So there's a wide range. Today's graph had a lot of information in it, and so it was perfect for an I notice, I wonder. What is this graph telling us? What do you notice in the graph? Don't do the wonders yet, just your notices. Take about 2 minutes. The I notice, I wonder helps kids slow down and really focus on what's in front of them. They wrote about what they noticed and then turned and talked to a neighbor to enhance and to draw attention to things that they maybe had missed.
Renewable energy aren't being used as much.
Yeah, seems to be going down actually.
The information she is getting is about the individual variability in that classroom. What the kids are getting is the benefit of learning from each other.
All right, let's get a list of I notice and I wonder.
I noticed that petroleum had a big jump in the 1900s.
It's another notice.
I noticed this is the monthly energy review.
Oh, so you're looking below the graph as well as above the graph. Awesome. All right, let's switch over to the back side, and I want your wonders. What do I wonder about this graph? The I wonder is a great way for me to see what they need to know. So what do you wonder? Oh my gosh, so much to wonder about.
I wonder what the other renewables are.
It's also a time when you can build confidence in kids. Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Aiden.
What is BTU?
What is a BTU? Great question. I notice, I wonder, just brings the conversation to a place where all people can contribute. It gives everyone a voice. It allows kids to listen to other people's ideas before they do the analysis. So it's like a way to collect information collaboratively, but allowing time to think first.
Okay, so I really love that video because there's a lot happening there. It really is an exemplar for engaging students. And like I said, it's not like they were, in some, complete deep state of engagement, but the teacher very clearly knew her students and she knew her goals. And so she was able to engage them cognitively with a graph, but had a lot of information. And so there were a lot of opportunities for students to generate original thinking about the graph, also by sharing their I wonders. Emotionally, I really do feel like an I wonder sort of taps into that emotional engagement because it does make it a little more personal and behavioral. You could see, how the students were organized in that class. You can tell in that class that it is expected that we support each other and we work together, but we also work independently. She gave, time constraints, and, it's clear that they have done this before. They have done this kind of discussion before in small groups. So a lot of work had been done in that classroom to engage students in something seemingly so simple as reading a graph and eventually probably answering questions about it. I couldn't really see the whole sheet in front of them, but that's just what I was noticing. So I dug into, this was one of my rabbit holes. I dug into different reports summarizing research on engagement. And so what I found so interesting about these two reports that I investigated, and we'll see both of them today, was that the research was designed in a very similar way, but they were looking at different angles of engagement. And so this one in particular was looked at about 20,000 students and asked, there were a wide range of questions and there were various categories and ratings. And without going into all of the details of how this survey was constructed, I just want to take a look at a couple of things that stuck out to me as interesting and relevant. And maybe we can even do our own I notice, I wonder. So I notice that there were only 3 medium-sized districts and 2 small. So looking at the total students in each of those, I can kind of gauge how they're determining a small or a medium school size. And these were the sort of ultimate results of the survey, but it certainly broke this down into many different domains. But these were the overall results. And the first thing I noticed is how the students that were classified as engaged or highly engaged decreased from elementary through high school. That's not a surprise to me. I saw that as a pattern in a lot of the data that I read on engagement in this particular report. But I wonder why we continue to get data that shows the decrease when we've learned so much and we know so much about engagement. So I have a lot of wonders about what it would take to shift the middle school and high school experience to increase engagement. So these were some other notable pieces. The top section it refers to what the percent of students that feel what they learn in school helps them become a better person. And the bottom is about understanding how subjects relate to one another. And so I really categorize these as relevance, really thinking about, how much of an opportunity do students have for learning that's relevant to their lives and how that impacts engagement. And again, in the top, you can see decreases from elementary to middle to high school. Now, we all know that there are various developmental stages, that certainly impact these numbers. We've all seen elementary school students, middle and high school, and we can see how they are different in so many ways. But it still, causes a lot of I wonders. I wonder what it takes to engage students in high school and middle school in the way that makes them feel as engaged as they did in elementary school. And when I think about these bottom two, these were total, so no specific age group, but 63% reported they see how subjects relate to one another, which I thought was a really interesting piece of information to investigate. And then 43% report they see how what they're learning in school relates to the outside world. So that number, 43% right there, tells me so much. And, maybe next time I go down the rabbit hole, I'll go into where that piece of information comes from and read in more detail about the kinds of things that built that piece of data. I shared the link of this report with you. It's right here on this slide, and I'll collect them all for a final slide for you as well in a folder to share with you if you want to investigate some of the pieces of this report if you're also interested. And so this is where it breaks that down of students that see how what they're learning in school relates to their future. And again, decreases from elementary to high school, but that is a significant drop from 73% to 46%. And so one of the wonders I have is, I wonder how much of the pressure of college and career ready sort of shifts our mindset of making sure we cover everything versus teaching, these students who are right in front of us and, being much more personalized maybe isn't the word, but it just makes me wonder, how can we, have standards and expectations and an end goal for students like college and career ready, but also bring those to where they can be relevant for students. So I don't have the answer. That is an I wonder for sure. So some of these elements of impact engagement, we have lots of different pieces like purpose, task, context, motivation, whether it's extrinsic, like a grade, or intrinsic, like I really want to do well and show my parents, that I did a good job on whatever this task might be. Level of choice, relevance, and confidence. Are some pieces that can really impact engagement. And so just as an example, I am a literacy person. So one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to is student engagement in reading. There are some elements of reading that, aren't that exciting, but are really important for us to learn. And they're hard to make engaging for kids. But, there are other times where we might have a little bit more leeway. And so I think in terms of these elements, and I think I'm just going to lay out like a very generic scenario and then sort of think through how we can maybe create shifts from any of these entry points, I guess I can call them, to boost engagement. So just moving down the list, here's the scenario of a whole class novel. We're going to read it in class. We're going to discuss it as a class, respond in a journal. It's our ELA class in the middle of the year. I get a participation grade and a written response grade. The teacher assigns the book, and it's relevant because it links to our current topic of study and the standards that we need to reach. And the title that we're reading is on grade level. So when I look at a list like this, I have to start and think, okay, what do I know about my students, about my unit goals, and about my standards that might allow me to kind of like move the levers a little bit? Like if we could think of these as levers. So if some of these are non-negotiables, let's say the whole class novel is a non-negotiable. Let's say grades are non-negotiable, and the relevance is non-negotiable. It has to link to this particular unit of study. Then how can I address these other pieces? Can I vary the tasks? Can I provide choice in tasks along the way? Can I break it down so there's opportunities to read whole class independently, partners, in small group? Can I provide other texts that students might be able to read that are that they can choose from, that build or extend the relevance, not just to the unit of study, but maybe how it relates to their lives? And so you can see how I'm just kind of looking at some of these pieces and thinking, like, how can I move the lever a little bit? If I don't have to commit to all of these, and if I think about my standards and unit goals and good teaching, no, I don't have to stick to all of these. So just thinking again, try to maybe put this in your own context. Do you have something where you have an idea of exactly what you need to accomplish and how you're going to do it, the materials you're going to use? And take a look through these different indicators and think, how can I adjust the levels on some of these to boost engagement? So if we start to think about agency, which really goes hand in hand with engagement, this really zooms in on the ability that students have to make choices and decisions and have a little control, an active role in their learning, like goal setting, taking ownership, feeling responsible for their learning, and also feeling confident. And I really link this to social emotional learning. And these are the domains in social emotional learning from Castle, and that are very commonly used in schools. And when I was really thinking through elements of agency, I immediately thought of this wheel. Because when I read all of those domains around the outside, I think about how much those have to do with agency, how strengthening my ability to do those things in each domain or having students increase their ability will really impact their agency in the classroom. And so I really wanted to come up with something catchy and fun to describe engagement versus agency. And after playing with some things for a while and not coming up with anything quite creative enough, I asked AI, tell me something that's catchy, that's the difference between engagement and agency. And so this actually came right from AI. And I said, you know what? I love it. I'm going to keep it. And so came up with engagement's the spark and the agency is the fire to keep it burning. And it made so much sense to me. I think engagements are like, ooh, we're going to do this, or this topic, or ooh, I get to I get to do it this way, or in this group, or this, whatever it is. An agency is that, like, those are those behaviors that they do. They just kind of churn and they do keep it burning and they keep kids going with learning. So I hope the metaphor of the spark and the fire also helps you as much as it did me to explain those. So just going to shift now to this other study I was talking about. So this one, particularly named agency, but you can see in the title of the report, it was looking at engagement mindsets for learning and agency. Now this one was 2015. The other report was 2021, 2022, which I find interesting because we know how different kids are post 2020 than they were before 2020. But for some reason, I feel like a lot of the research would still remain. And I even think that now we can say it's even more critical that we focus on engagement and agency with students because they have so many choices now with apps and Netflix and menus. It's just they have everything at their fingertips and can make choices on their own so often outside of school that they almost come to expect that in their daily lives. So it's probably more important now. So even though this was from 2015, I found some really interesting things in this report as well. And again, I have the link shared with you in case you are interested in joining me down my rabbit hole. So one of the things that was interesting was that, they looked at factors like happiness, conduct, conscientiousness, future orientation, like what do they see themselves doing after graduation? There were a ton of them. I had a hard time even figuring out what to pull out to give a good example. But the other thing that it was looking at these various factors like happiness in conjunction with what they had determined were 7 characteristics of effective classrooms, and how those components, they were looking to see, if we have classrooms with these 7 components, can we expect, highly engaged students? And interestingly, some of the components impacted factors negatively, not in all cases, but it really made me stop to think about this. So there are 7. So we're going to look at these in groups here. So we'll look at the first 4. So they're all beginning with C too, so easy to remember. They named that care, confer, captivate, and clarify, that those were elements of highly effective classrooms. So care, teacher-student relationships; confer, I talk with students about their learning. We have open communication. Captivate, I'm capturing their interest in learning. I know how to capture their interest with whatever it is we're doing in class. And then clarify breaks it down there, helping students avoid confusion. So can you pause and just think about these? Are there any of these here that you think could go awry, if maybe out of balance? Here were the findings. Based on the entire survey that combines the positive effects, but also the negative impact. So with care, it was be attentive and sensitive, but don't coddle. So care was one of them that showed up as, sometimes care in the, I don't want to say too much of it, but, a certain shade of caring, I guess is the best way to say it, could really create this like too much of like a loosey-goosey environment, that everything's kind of negotiable, or there aren't enough parameters around things. And so it just kind of described that, which I thought was really interesting. And I think I can kind of see that happening if, there's an extremely caring environment that lacks these other pieces. I think, they're definitely a whole. So confer, this was another one that just had a few pieces that came out that, like, does it turn into just noise and like chatter between teacher and student, or is it really supporting their learning or helping them? Are they getting feedback that really does help them in the moment or help them with their goals? And then captivate and clarify, neither of these had anything negative associated with it, except with the clarify. If anyone interprets clarify as tell students the answer, then that doesn't match up, because that's not really what it means to clarify. So just some interesting pieces for those. All right, the next 3 were consolidate, challenge, and classroom management. So in this case, for consolidate, they're referring to organizing information so that students can access the learning, that it's sequenced well, they're learning the most important things. There's not a lot of extraneous information. Things are very clear. And so consolidate was this first one. Challenge breaks it down there, rigor and persistence. And then we all know how classroom management looks like and feels like. So any of these that might have a negative impact on the classroom? So none of these came out with any negative ones. And the only one that I thought was maybe interesting was for classroom management, was if anyone, maybe interpreted classroom management as more like control and compliance versus creating structures and routines that enable agency. But reading into this report further, I could kind of see that these terms were really broken down and well illustrated in the kinds of questions they were asking. So I thought these were really interesting pieces to look at. And so again, just to kind of go back: care, confer, captivate, clarify, consolidate, challenge, and classroom management as some C's that really support engaged classrooms and build agency in students. So here's a resource that I wanted to share with you, really in relation to kind of like how the surveys were built. When you're looking at a variety of indicators, this is a survey, or not really a survey, it's a checklist of tier one look fors. So priority look fors in a classroom. So the kinds of things that you would be looking for in a classroom that understands the importance of boosting engagement and building student agency. And so this is a resource available to you through this link. And again, like I said, it'll be in a folder at the end as well. But it moves through different domains, such as classroom environment, and really does break down in just a few different bullet points. Here are some things you'll see. And it's something you can even use for yourself. And you use a rating of 1 to 4, anywhere from 1, there's no evidence of this, to 4, exemplary evidence. And the couple of times that I have used this, we had a chance to sort of talk about it as a group, and it was a great thing to do to really process it either one-on-one with the teacher or as a team together, because then you can really talk through the things that had no evidence, because it's possible that those things do exist, but they weren't visible, right, on the wall, or maybe they were they were just somewhere where you couldn't see or couldn't access. So I think a tool like this is really only useful if it's used as maybe even a self-assessment. And if an outside person or a colleague is assessing, that you definitely have a conversation and talk through each of these later, because then you can really find areas of growth. So when you find, areas where there's a lot of 1s or 2s, then that really paints the picture of, where you might set some goals for some growth as a teacher in your classroom. So the last thing we'll take a look at today is just this reciprocal relationship between teacher engagement and agency and student engagement and agency. And so I really think, I think back to the author that we heard from earlier, Ellen Keene, and when she talks about, teachers pursuing their own passions so that students kind of see what that can look like and feel like. It's almost like an invitation, to be able to be that engaged and to share and talk about that. But how in teachers within the profession, if we have schools that are empowering teachers as individuals and as teams, and providing them opportunities that really build agency, then we're going to see more teacher engagement. And when we see that, it directly relates to the engagement and agency that students will feel in the classroom. These two things absolutely feed each other rather. And I think if you've ever worked somewhere where it's a really strong collaborative environment, it's a very open and honest place to work. It's a place where learning is valued and mistakes are valued, and that you have that kind of rich learning environment, then you see the impact that has on wanting to go to work every day and become a better teacher, a better member of the learning community. And then when you have more energy and you're excited to be there, that impacts students. They feel that. And also knowing, like we said earlier, knowing that what that feels like helps us to create that kind of space for students so they can have a similar experience. So I want to show you an example of what I feel like is a really engaged staff and engaged students, at least through the video. But this is a particular example that I've been hanging on to for just the right purpose. And I was excited that it really fit the purpose for this series today. So this is a school where they have a system in place where teachers are regularly working together and talking through problems of practice and providing peer feedback. They're observing each other, they're spending time in each other's rooms, meeting together. And it not only creates this culture among them as staff members of the school, but it also creates a lot of consistency for students so that students have this experience of they have an experience from classroom to classroom to classroom, and it's similar, meaning that expectations and the kind of opportunities provided that boost engagement and agency are going to be relatively consistent across classrooms. It won't be the kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, you get to go to so-and-so's class and that's a really good time and you learn a lot, but then you go here and, it's a snooze fest. So that's kind of an exaggerated example, but I wanted to play this because I do think it is a really good example of the reciprocal relationship.
We as a teaching staff, we're going to learn best when we learn from each other.
It was there, they just don't trust themselves.
Because we participate in small groups called flocks, we have this profound sense that we're not alone in this work.
At Pearl Cone, we have a really clear structure because when you're consistent, room to room, hallway to hallway, academy to academy, kids know what to expect, and so they feel safe within that structure and are quicker to learn.
I feel like we've built a culture of you know what the expectation is. The flock was developed by a group of teachers born out of the idea that we want consistency across the board, also the level and rigor of instruction.
Part of the goal is teamwork and making sure that everyone participates, right?
We are really, really clear about our expectations. So we have 5 core values. They are in every hallway and in every classroom. So they see it all the time and they hear it all the time. We also have non-negotiables that are really specific.
We always look for, are we promoting the core values within our classrooms? And are we holding kids to behavioral expectations called the non-negotiables? So the flock was born out of trying to gain a consistency classroom to classroom with those expectations for kids.
All right, you guys know what's expected of you today, correct?
We took a model of looking at peer feedback and how we could really support each other for the sake of our kids. We have teachers of various disciplines and various years of experience. We're looking at classroom behavior, classroom culture. Looking at those core values, we can kind of check off what's being adhered to or broken. The rubric is both qualitative and quantitative, so you're able to write notes on what you see and writing that evidence down to have more meaningful conversations. And then we talk about what we've seen. When we look at the core values, a lot of what we saw was evidence of others first. Just how they responded to each other was a short example of that. So having that conversation is really helpful because we get a lot of feedback.
You watched hands go like this.
But as they were talking to each other, you see some of the hands kind of slide down.
They feel like there should be right or wrong, but you're trying to get them to see their own identity, and I think that that's where you are pushing them.
When I get feedback from my colleagues like, hey, immediately you had 3 or 4 table groups that raised their hand, I now am more aware going into another class. Am I answering that question? Or am I posing another question that allows the student to dig deeper?
All right, you guys are working, you got 15, 20 minutes.
We've seen just huge reductions in off-task behaviors.
I think one of the biggest benefits to the consistency is there's a common language. When a kid hears me say, good job, you really showed grit there and persevered through it, and they go to another classroom and they hear the same thing, there's no confusion. We are able to instill in them a changed perspective. It allows us to access the resources that are already in them, going, hey, you have this great capacity to learn and grow.
I'm not going to say it defines who I am, but to the world, yes.
All right. I love a lot about that video too. I'm just certainly curious to hear what many of you thought about it. I think one of the things that I notice is, actually, I'll back up. One of the things that I love the most was what she said toward the end, was recognizing that you all have the capacity to do this. Like, you're all amazing humans. You can do this. You have the capacity to learn and be great and wonderful and grow. And that belief is everything, I think, to a school, to believe that students are capable of great and wonderful things. And students respond to that too, when they know that, that teachers believe in them. And when I think about how that kind of work the teachers are doing can support engagement and agency, it's both. It's supporting, it's giving teachers agency by being coaches for each other, and it's continuing. So it's a structure they have set up. So it's not just something they're doing for 1 year or just a couple of months or whatever. This is a structure they have in place so they continue doing it. And think how much you can learn year after year being in that kind of environment with your colleagues. I just really think that that's that fire that keeps it going, the way we described agency earlier. And then really looking at the students, I think when the classroom has expectations and has the expected parameters, and they're similar class to class, like she was saying, there's no confusion. So, what one thing means here is what it means over there. And so that is, their whole day. It's not switching from, well, you have this experience here and you have these expectations there, and then in this class you can get away with this, but over here you definitely can't. That doesn't exist. And so it creates, kind of takes the drama out of the situation. And by removing that from the situation for students, then you create space for engagement and agency. So love how those feed off of each other. All right, well, it was great spending time with you today. I am looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday, April 2nd, from 3:30 to 4:45. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to Demonstrated Success. You can email me and with any questions you might have, and we will get back to you. So thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.